Welcome to Deserts of Karak, and welcome back to the past. This is Majir Paktu speaking, and this is more Artifact Cup 13. On the Boneyard is the first game between Tren and Last Rights, who also goes by Dreamlands, popularly on his YouTube channel, and also goes by Ragnarok. I think that's in roughly reverse order. I think these days he's Last Rights, at least in-game, and then Dreamlands on YouTube. And he's got too many names, and I call him out for it every single time that I cast him because it's so confusing. I don't even know what to call him. I think I'm going to call him Last Rights for now because we're watching from his perspective here. He is in the white and, I guess I should have looked on the screen, white and pink? White and red? I don't know. The nighttime maps always sort of confuse that. But he's in the Soban carrier, as we can see from that giant Soban logo and the kind of general shape of the carrier. Going to be starting on CUs, going on to RUs, getting LAV fab right off the beginning, and moving out with his base runner. His opponent is Tren, who we can't see. Now we can. Who is fighting as the red and orange, red and black. I don't really know how to read these colors. Knef carrier, my favorite faction. And let's see what he's done. He's gone for an RU opening, so let me guess. Railguns with production cruiser kind of sneaking up behind. We'll see. That's my prediction. He's going for Sandskimmer fab as well, and also moving out with his base runner, which is less of a surprise. We're on the Boneyard, relatively big map, not necessarily open, kind of big swooshy dunes on this side that are relatively shallow, so you can actually have a lot of fun railgun and AAV combat in here. And then on the other side, a lot of these structures, which you might think are really low and you can just shoot over them, but as it turns out, even these very shallow structures prevent any kind of fire from shooting across over them. So,
enemy signature identified.
A lot of tight maneuvering spaces in this map, and a lot of opportunity for railguns to be blocked on line of sight, and a lot of opportunity for air to be used, because they don't have the same sort of line of sight issues.
Proceed to rally point.
Move order confirmed.
So, as predicted, Tren is going for railgun fabrication. This is kind of his MO.
LAV construction complete.
And, you know, I don't know what Last Rights MO would be. It looks like he's going AAV fab. Now, this is a little bit late. Because, at least I think it is. Let's see, we're about 2.5 minutes in. No, maybe this is right on time.
Green, reposition. Green line confirmed.
I forget if 2.5 minutes is about when you should be producing your first AAV or completing the AAV tech. In any case, I don't want to miss this. Tren is deploying a blast drone to provide cover for his base runner. And that's going to really drive off these LAVs from Last Rights. They really can't go over this dune in any kind of group because this blast drone will just blow them up.
Green line confirmed.
So instead, Last Rights is kind of trying to flank this blast drone and keep it from getting in, and it's going to take 2 LAVs. That's a profitable trade for Tren. And I'm sure that also distracted Last Rights for a few moments there while he was micromanaging those.
Systems online. We're moving out.
Although it's relatively early in the game. So we see Last Rights going for railgun fab right after AAVs and producing his AAVs as well. Meanwhile, Tren is already producing railguns. So on this map, railguns can be very powerful at the home base because this is a relatively open area. You have dunes that you can get up on either side, and you can shoot down on this entire sort of valley area and really have control of your home line. But once you get into these zones, like where Last Rights base runner is, for example, it becomes very hard to use railguns effectively.
Keep eyes
Carrier power reserves expanded.
Push up. Destination set.
Hostile unit marked.
Carrier weapon systems online.
Space runner taking enemy fire.
Be ready for contact. Keep eyes out for targets.
Hostile threat marked on sensors.
If you haven't seen this, this was a targeting disruptor, which the Soban base runner can deploy, and within the zone, units are slowed and cannot shoot at anything. However, while it saved the artifact getting into the zone, it won't save the base runner getting
Enemy
out.
sighted. Armored vehicle taking effective fire.
Fire on the move.
Combat alert.
Another blast
Runner
drone
destroyed.
comes in here and doesn't get that second LAV, so that's actually not a very good
LAV has been
trade.
lost.
And these AAVs are going to very effectively drive Tren off of his resource expansion. Tren was, I believe, mining with... Oh, he does not have refinery mode yet. Okay.
Hostile unit marked.
So he was just remote mining, same as Last Rights is doing now. But we've got kind of two fights here going on, and although they're going to be slowed by these ALMs, these armed logistics modules here, these railguns are probably going to do significant damage to the salvaging line here. Meanwhile, Last Rights is not pushing in. He has driven Tren off of his own salvaging line, but he isn't doing any real damage. And these railguns being out now are really closing that window for Tren to do any damage. So it looks like Last Rights maybe lost a salvager and retreated with the rest of them. I'm surprised that Tren didn't drive in harder with
Signature
those.
identified.
Maybe he was scared off by these railguns, but I think he could have closed and done some real damage. Here, Last Rights with these two AVs is not going to be able to do a whole lot of damage against these railguns. He's using smoke very effectively to screen off the railguns from outside and really only engage with the railguns that he wants to. But I'm not sure it's going to be enough. He's going to have to retreat with this and this one.
Enemy contact on
And
the
now
board.
these railguns have the high ground against any incoming units. So there's no way he can turn this around and really do any damage. He has to truly run.
Dropped an artifact.
And unfortunately, he's going to run right back into another group of railguns. So Tren is really consolidating control around his area of the map. Didn't really go for much economic damage against Last Rights. So interesting choice there.
Hostile threat marked on sensors.
And I wonder if both players were just a little more afraid
LAV
of
taking effective fire.
their opponent's forces than they should have been. I think
LAV destroyed.
Tren could have done a great deal of damage even with the railguns that were coming out by just maneuvering around and getting in close with them. And there wasn't a whole lot of carrier power here that could do anything, especially because the Soban carrier is just garbage at defense. Meanwhile, on Tren's side, if the AAVs, when they had first pushed off the production cruiser, had continued forward into very close quarters with this Kneff carrier, they could have taken out the salvaging line and also engaged with the railguns as they came out of Tren's production cruiser.
Support cruiser online.
Instead, what we see is both players mostly retain their economy, and Tren has amassed a very large assault railgun force. He's known for doing this. There are no heavy railguns here. He really just wants to have a mobile, armored, vetted up, fast attack squad. And Last Rights, to his credit, is doing really exactly what he needs to with these railguns, hanging out back here in this big wide open zone. You can sit anywhere in here and you can shoot anything you see because
Railgun assembly.
there are just no obstructions to line of sight. So rather than chasing over the dune, Last Rights is going to continue patrolling around his carrier and hope to get some shots off while he builds up behind it.
Move out.
Standing by.
Tech-wise, Last Rights has not gotten any armor or railgun upgrades yet,
Online.
and seems to have gotten one power reserve upgrade, nothing significant, has not gotten any other tech aside from railguns and AAVs. Tren, on the other hand, missile ship fabrication, so a little bit paranoid about
An LAV
any
has
kind
been
of
lost.
aircraft that
Red
could
attack
come,
vehicle under fire.
and also 2 levels of railgun armor.
Move it. Get us
A salvager has been lost.
So this kind of hit and run, where Tren can just kind of duck behind the rock, is really, really easy to do with these assault rails. And the Soban railguns, while they are powerful and they do have this marked target ability, they can do a lot of damage, it's not going to be as agile as these. And so Last Rights is going to have to be really careful with his positioning of these in order to do anything against this powerful blob.
Proceed to rally point. Location
And
marked.
Tren's now going up to the railgun armor level 3, so while these assault rails are still going to be fairly vulnerable to railguns, they won't go down
Enemy contact on
quite
the
as
board.
easily, and LAVs now are going to be just about useless.
Enemy unit detected.
So I want to watch the sight lines here.
Tracking enemy target.
You can see that this is really wide open ground, and Tren, while he cannot
assault railgun
fire,
neutralized.
Last Rights is firing a whole lot, and now is deploying ALMs, which are going to stun these units in place, stop them from moving in as aggressively. And this is where the Soban can really shine. There's nothing that these units can do. They cannot move forward, they will just be stunned, and they cannot apply any damage to these railguns. And their retreat was slowed, and now
Enemy signature identified.
this force that was once at least 9, 10 railguns is 6, and while this will repair, it did have to retreat wounded. It would not surprise me if Tren decides to shift into heavy railguns, considering that he has a lot of the tech already. He has the maximum railgun armor, and it wouldn't be terribly expensive to get range calibration on them, not that you would really need that to have them be effective.
Enemy on sensors.
He is going for this dart maneuver, which would allow him to use this ability, which maximum speed and acceleration greatly increased in direction of target location. So you can use this, and basically you just hit D and you click where you want to go, and the railguns go very quickly there. So
Contact on the board.
if he's in a situation where the ALMs are chain stunning him again, and he just wants to get in right on top of Last Rights railguns, he can use the ability to do that. He can also use it to retreat or to sidestep.
Enemy contact on the board. Enemy contact on sensor.
Last Rights, meanwhile, does have an armor level and is getting the railgun mag accelerator
Runner
upgrade,
approaching AO.
which will help against the armor significantly. It's really gonna make that armor insignificant against railguns, especially against Soban railguns. But
Hostile unit
he
marked.
does have to be very careful about this positioning, especially if he gets engaged around these dunes.
Enemy forces have acquired an artifact.
Meanwhile, just to watch the artifacts real quick, Tren has 3. Last Rights has 1, and Tren is being very annoying with these blast drones. And Last Rights really has to be careful about blast drones around these railguns, because blast drones against unupgraded railguns can just take out a railgun. They can take out multiple railguns in one hit.
Hostile base runner.
These are upgraded armored railguns, however, a blast drone can still do significant damage. And it looks like Tren wants to do that, wants to use that. Something that Last Rights could do here is he could use Mark Target, and that would greatly enhance the accuracy of all the other railguns against the blast drone. I'm not sure if he used that there or if he knows that trick, but it's something to watch for. You can see this sort of yellow beam when Mark Target is in play.
New threat identified.
Green line confirmed.
That is just a base runner. I almost mistook that for a production cruiser and thought that's losing health awfully
Enemy
fast.
sighted.
These two LEVs are just being annoying, as they should be, because
Confirmed.
Last Rights realizes he's in mortal peril with these artifacts in play.
Copy.
Worth noting, Last Rights just now finishing up both Heavy Vehicle Armor 2, which will help with the railguns, it does not just help AAVs, and also getting fighters. Now, Trent already has missile ships on the field because a few minutes ago he was researching that tech, but he does not have interceptor tech of his own, and he's going for siege cruisers instead.
Location marked.
Tracking enemy target.
On our way.
At the same time, Last Rights does have missile batteries, so even if Trent did want to go for air, it would be
Underway.
not so much to his advantage.
Redeploying to mark. New threat identified.
Confirmed.
Tracking hostile.
This is a really nice position for Last Rights if he maneuvers carefully and if he gets some scouting over here. He does have a UAV in play, and if he can just sit right up on top of this dune, he can have a high ground advantage against units he fires upon, and he can duck behind this region. He might not realize that he's actually currently hiding behind there, but
Enemy railgun firing on friendly.
he's got a lot of cover all around him, and he can duck back behind this dune or back behind these structures, and with the UAV in play, he can fire at units that cannot see his units. This is a lot of LAVs, and there's a lot of action going around the map. I'm gonna start missing a lot of it. There's a blast drone here that could be really bad for these LAVs, and these LAVs are also gonna try and
on approach.
take down this production cruiser. That was a big blast drone hit. Lots of LAVs going down, and the remaining sand scammers here from Tren are probably going to clean that up. Meanwhile, it looks like the railguns have mostly disengaged with Last Rights railguns hiding behind the dunes with a missile battery now in play. No AAVs in sight here, and no fighters coming out yet for Last Rights, but he's getting assault cruiser tech, which indicates to me he may be planning on getting a artillery cruiser.
Tracking hostile.
And recall, we did see it, and I didn't mention it, but Tren has already researched siege cruiser tech.
Support cruiser taking hostile
So,
fire.
Tren here, being forced off.
Rally point designated. Move out.
Excuse me, Tren forcing off Last Rights and
Sensor post under fire.
losing the support cruiser. I believe it said assault cruiser, and that was not correct. That was definitely a support cruiser. Last Rights really ought to get some good hits here on
Hostile forces are pursuing
these
an
assault railguns, and this is gonna just clean them right up unless they retreat right away. It looks like he tried to use his dash ability, but he pretty much loses all of these railguns. One might make it away.
Moving the site. We're clear.
Losing a support cruiser hurts, but I'm not sure that that was worth it for Tren, given that now his military consists of some sand skimmers, which are not upgraded, and a small contingent of heavy railguns. And while Last Rights did lose his LAV contingent, he does have air on the field, and Tren is going to have to use these missile ships well. Right now, they're just sort of sitting here on the approach path to his home base. Another thing to watch here is that Tren is getting dangerously close to an artifact victory.
We're cleared to push up.
He will be at 4 artifacts. There's no way this is going to be disputed. And while Last Rights is paying attention, he's trying to ferry artifacts of his own, and he may go up to 3 if he can deal with this one lone assault railgun. He needs to make sure that this artifact doesn't go to Tren.
Construction units depleted.
Now, Tren does not have another base runner here, but he does have a siege cruiser coming out. The Knef siege cruiser is very powerful at point-blank range in direct combat, which is probably not going to want to do against these Soban railguns. And it does still have an artillery barrage, which is coming out now, but it's not a particularly strong barrage compared to the other artillery cruisers from the other factions. So all of Tren's heavy railguns are going to go down now. The artillery barrage is mostly going to miss, and the real hope here for Tren is going to be these sand skimmers. They did take a whole lot of damage from a missiles barrage. And ALM's going to try and stun these, and what I want to see is Last Rights going to use Mark Target? He's going to pull out the Target Disruptor, he's going to pull out ALMs, but he's not using Mark Target, and he's not really able to effectively handle these sand skimmers. And there are a lot of them. There are 18, 17 sand skimmers on the field here. He is bringing out fighters, which may run into these missile ships. That could be very dangerous. And he's also going to lose that artifact, which is going to put him very much behind on the artifact game.
Confirmed. Armor ready.
So Last Rights now has lost a lot of his own railguns. Tren also losing a lot of railguns, but he seems to have just pivoted. He's going into multiple siege cruisers now and large sand skimmer blobs, and he is upgrading those sand skimmers as well. So he's got damage and armor level 1, and also has sand skimmer rating. Meanwhile, Last Rights fighters are taking damage, and 1 going down to the missile battery, 2 going down, but he may be able to just take out this base runner. It doesn't look like Last Rights is microing these fighters. So he may have been able to save those fighters. He will lose all 3. And that base runner is going to die if it takes maybe 1 more hit of damage. It's not going to die for now.
Sensor post under fire.
On our way. Move order confirmed.
Awaiting orders. Hostile strike craft destroyed.
Target.
So as we expected before, Last Rights is going for artillery cruiser tech, but he also produced 2 assault cruisers, which makes a lot of sense in this game. Normally I rip on people for building assault cruisers when it makes no sense. But assault cruisers are very, very good at dealing with strike craft like sand skimmers. So if he can get these out in time, actually he has them out, but if he can get them in position in time and keep them in the right spot, he can do a lot of damage to these sand skimmer blobs, which will allow his railguns to run free again. As it is, he's engaging with these artillery cruisers directly, which he should be doing with his railguns in order to drive off the siege cruiser, especially if he used the Mark Target ability, he would be able to just nuke down these units. He is wisely bringing his assault cruisers back to deal with the sand skimmers, and that's going to be really effective. We see a few ALM shots here, pinning them in place while they run away. You can just see the range with that AoE damage that these assault cruisers can hit at. That sand skimmer blob is now very much reduced. Diminished. That's the word I want to use. That's the very educated caster word I can use. Diminished. Those sand skimmers were diminished. So this siege cruiser did not go down. I did not see any Mark Target used. I think if even just 1 railgun had used Mark Target, that siege cruiser would have been down, and possibly the other one would have died as well, because Mark Target increases the accuracy and damage of other units hitting it. So instead, these railguns will sort of take more damage by attrition. They could be repaired even if they're not lost, but my guess is they're going to stay in combat and just live with the reduced hit points. So it's not great. Tren, meanwhile, knows he just needs 1 artifact. Last Rights is going to prioritize this base runner, but it's going to quickly go over the hill. Again, Mark Target would be really effective here. Just get a huge burst of railgun damage off on this unit.
Enemy contact on the board.
I missed that, by the way, with all of the action, that Tren has fighters now.
Cruiser under attack.
And so the assault cruiser is going to engage this force that's going to try and cover for the base runner. The assault cruisers will go down because they're taking... Ooh, maybe won't go
Send
down.
orders.
Assault cruiser is at least going to be very weakened.
Reposition. Set
This
unit.
railgun group needs to be, I
Enemy
believe,
interceptor engaging unit.
moving up to try and destroy this base runner. This base runner is very low.
Salvage your copies.
Carrier
There are no
copies.
fighters in play for Last Rights. There is another assault cruiser. I don't think it'll get here in time. Knef base runners cannot repair, so
Green line confirmed. Set unit.
very little damage is really needed to prevent this scoring from happening. But it's a question of whether or not Last Rights can get in. These two siege cruisers can do a lot of damage to an assault cruiser.
Moving out. Engage targets on site. Get
So
this
Last Rights is
cruiser
going
in.
to use a missile barrage, which is just going to miss. It was a little too far away. I think this is going to be game here, because without any fighters,
Underway.
Ready. Hostile contact
Last Rights
on the
doesn't
board.
have any way to break past these siege cruisers. These units will all be cleaned up by the siege cruiser, and this is going to make it in. So I believe Tren will take game one here.
Enemy sighted.
Enemy.
Awesome. That was pretty exciting. And at a few places, I missed tech choices. It looks like Tren never went for the heavy railgun tech, but did go for the fighter tech, and of course had already maxed out his railgun armor. And Last Rights, oh, it looks like I can't switch tech views now. That's a fun. I'll file a bug report against myself on that one because I am using the tech viewing little replay mod that I made. But it looks like with the game paused here, there's no time for an update to run. So that was game one. Exciting. And let's move on to game two. I think that Last Rights that game had a strong enough economy. Tren had a stronger economy, clearly, but Last Rights certainly wasn't lagging behind by too much, and I think it was only near the end that Last Rights economy was a little bit weaker because he had lost one of his expansions to the Sandskimmer rating. And you can see in units built, not a big difference there. Tren obviously building a lot of Sandskimmers, Last Rights building mostly railguns, but it's still pretty even on the combat, and units destroyed and everything. I really think what it came down to is that Tren shifted into those heavy units later on, and Last Rights did not use the mark target ability. That's really the strength of those Soban railguns, and against the base runner, he didn't use it when he could have killed that final artifact. Against the siege cruisers, he didn't use it, so one of them was almost dead and was able to repair. And I think that using mark target wisely, he could have trapped and killed both of those siege cruisers with the amount of railguns that he had. So I'll watch for that in the future. And granted, remember, this is Artifact Cup 13. So this was a while ago. I haven't looked up exactly when this cup occurred.
Logistics modules.
So
Standing by.
I may be harping on something that is completely irrelevant to Last Rights, and he may be saying, like, yeah, use mark target every single game, and, but it may also just be something that he wasn't thinking of in the heat of the moment, because it's just an ability you have to kind of remember, and it's very easy to forget. So we're here in the Shallows, watching again Last Rights here in the white Soban carrier, and Tren in the red Knef carrier. I think it's red and yellow. There's a nice yellow stripe there. So we can see Tren opening up on CUs, expanding to RUs, going to be moving out and probably expanding with more resources here onto his nearby expansions. Tech-wise, going for Sandskimmer Fab as well, and not retiring his base runner, which makes sense. It's a Knef base runner. You want that. It's another production unit. If you think of it that way, Tren says that a lot, because you could produce blast drones out of it while your production cruiser is busy doing something else. One of my favorite abilities of the Knef base runner is the smoke wall, because it doesn't just release smoke once. It releases smoke 3 different times. And so if you're moving, you actually create this wall of smoke behind you. So if you have a few base runners, Knef base runners, that are together, one of them can smoke and cover the other, and then they can kind of trade positions slightly and continue smoking. And you can cover all the way to an extraction zone almost from, if you had 3 of them, you could probably cover your approach all the way from these artifacts to the extraction zone. But as it is, you can pull a lot of tricks with that, and you can retreat behind a base runner if you have it up front in a combat position. So, definitely in favor of keeping Kneff base runners. Sometimes I retire them, but if I do, I tend to build 2 or 3 more later in the game once I have plenty of
Awaiting
CUs.
orders.
Push up to that point.
LAV construction complete.
LAV's coming out for Last Rights. He's not going for an early AAV open or anything like that, which would be strong, I think. Maybe less so against a Kneff carrier, which has the missile systems, but, you know, at power level 1, those aren't even that strong. So being able to get a couple AAVs in here would be really powerful. Last Rights isn't going to go for that. Instead, he's going to go for these LAVs, which are going to allow him to challenge this base runner. And against any other faction, I would say, will allow him to destroy this base runner and deny the artifact. But this is a Kneff base runner. It can smoke. It can use blast drones. It can smoke and sit there and build a blast drone, and then as it emerges from the smoke and all of the LAVs swarm it, it can deploy the blast drone and destroy all those LAVs. So, Tren is going to retreat, but
Base runner assembly complete. Confirmed.
don't discount this artifact yet. It's not dead yet.
Hostile threat marked on sensors.
I missed a tech choice here. Tren has gone for assault
Enemy
ships,
on sensors.
which are going to help deal with these LAVs. And this is a really unfortunate choice for Last Rights now. It's not the LAVs themselves
Enemy
necessarily
contact
bad,
on sensors.
but now that Tren has gone for assault ships, these units are mostly useless. They're really good as scouts, maybe, and as little mobile strike forces, but only if you can draw out these units, because these will just chew up the LAVs. That said, these being the faster units and driving back the base runner from Tren gave Last Rights a window to take an artifact of his own.
Enemy contact on the board. Hostile armor on approach.
Tren is unsurprisingly going for interceptor tech after the assault ship tech.
Enemy signature
That is one difference
identified. Go
between the tech trees of the
Enemy base runner
Coalition and
approaching
Soban
AO.
factions and the Kneff and Galcian. The Kneff and Galcian need to get assault ships before they can get
Enemy
interceptors.
sighted.
So if you see assault ships, you should definitely be paranoid that interceptors are coming later. And
Reading.
Last Rights, I almost said Dreamlands, which is his other name. Last Rights, meanwhile, has gone for railguns.
Ready.
On our way.
And I believe that you need AAV tech in order to get
Confirmed.
missile ships. So I don't think he's researched missile ships yet, but I could be wrong about that. Not much fighting happening here. Railguns going to push away these assault ships. This UAV here is working great for Last Rights because he can see these units at long range and fire upon them with the railguns when he gets a clear line of sight. However, if you notice, the terrain kind of blocks that a little bit. Like, these railguns
Railgun reading you.
Enemy
aren't
contact
necessarily
on the
able to
board.
get a target lock on these units.
Contact. Enemy armor.
They're also a little too
Roger.
far away right now,
Displacing now.
maybe. But they'll get there.
Railgun online.
Both players are going to take an artifact
Hostile
each.
contact on the board. Enemy sighted.
On our way. Move order
Let's see
confirmed.
what this does. And the interceptors are going to come out for Trent. So this is, again, a very unfortunate
Contact. Enemy
build
strike fighter
choice
airborne.
for Dreamlands because he's really built exactly the things that Tren can counter. Interceptors are very good at hitting railguns. The railguns are relatively slow, weak, unarmored targets. And interceptors can just
Green line confirmed. We're moving
do a
out.
whole lot of damage to them.
Location
The
marked.
one thing that Last Rights has in his favor is he has LAVs, and if he built a little more of these, I think that would be my move at this point, is build a few more LAVs,
responding.
because LAVs, unlike Sandscammers, can shoot up. They have the range to actually hit aircraft and UAVs. So building lots of these and guarding the railguns with them means that Tren pays a high cost whenever he tries to deploy the fighters against
Get us underway.
Last Rights, and it means that he doesn't have to invest in the missile ship tech, and it means also that his anti-air is very mobile. Now instead, Last Rights has opted also for an anti-air turret post, but my guess is that that AAV tech was intended to get missile batteries unlocked, so I'll be watching for this tech choice to come
Hostile
in.
unit marked.
Meanwhile, I do want to watch the Siege Cruiser Fab
Heading
has
set.
been queued up here for Tren.
Enemy signature identified.
Mark CU. Copies. Move exchange relay 03.
Hostile armor on the board.
Artifact location verified.
Tren's interceptors coming in from behind. He is micromanaging the approach that they're taking, and they are going to try and hit the resourcing line, the back resourcing line of Tren, of Last Rights. Take out a few salvagers. It's going to work very well, actually, especially because these salvagers are clustered up. I will say, if you're fighting against a Knef player, you have no excuse to have your salvagers clustered up. You ought to be spreading those out as insurance against blast drones, but it's also always useful against any faction as insurance against interceptors. You can actually spread your salvagers out so that they're still all in range of a support cruiser, but none of them are too close to each other, and so AoE damage isn't as effective against them. You can see that these salvagers, I mean, there are 2 salvagers in this location. It looks like one, but there are 2 salvagers in the exact same place. And AoE, any AoE damage is going to just hit both of those. So if you move one of these, say, over here, if you look at the range, it's actually pretty good. So you can move one of them over here, you can take one of these salvagers, move them over here, and move your support cruiser right in the middle there. If you position it just right, the salvagers don't have any extra travel time and are much more resilient to blast damage.
Coordinates confirmed. Coordinates confirmed.
Enemy armor inbound.
Enough talk on that, though. We're getting all kinds of chatter over our radio here about enemies being inbound and on approach and signatures detected and yada yada yada. Last Rights has got another artifact in. This AA is still up, so be watching that. Tren still has those fighters, and Tren also has siege tech and has queued up a siege cruiser. Actually, he has one built and he's queued up a second one, so that's menacing. These LEVs are probably dead. There are assault ships, 5 of them on the way. But who knows? Maybe this UAV... that UAV's not going to do anything. Interceptors are very good at anti-air, and those interceptors were not going to let that UAV get any scouting in. Especially with Last Rights having the railguns they does. You can see there, the LEV shooting up. It's not so effective with just one of them, but if you get a mass of, say, 10 LEVs, they become pretty effective anti-air. This is cool. Siege cruiser, big slow unit, gets trapped in the targeting jammer for a while, and it might just buy enough time for this base runner from Last Rights to get in and take that artifact right under the nose of Last Rights. We'll see. These direct fire missiles from the siege cruiser are hitting the base runner, but the base runner's got a surprising number of hit points there, and it might just be enough. Here, another clutch targeting jammer is going to prevent these sand skimmers from being able to damage this base runner before it gets into the targeting, into the extraction zone. This one does go down. Some assault ships came to help the siege cruiser. I'm a little surprised that these railguns didn't come in and try to do some damage against the siege cruiser, but in any case, both base runners from Last Rights will go down, but not before he gets another artifact, putting him up at 3 artifacts extracted, which makes the artifact victory a very credible threat. He could grab just this artifact and this artifact at the same time, cover this approach here, and get them to the extraction zone and win.
Enemy sand skimmer on approach. Armored vehicle taking effective fire.
So I expect we will see Last Rights build more base runners before the game is over. He is getting fighters of his own, which should help against these pretty heavy, immobile units.
Enemy sighted.
I shouldn't say immobile, but not very mobile. Don't know how much damage the missile batteries are doing there against these armored targets, but there was a nice ALM there. It did get taken down pretty quick, but may have bought enough railgun hits. Again, I want to see Mark Target being used. If Mark Target were used, that siege cruiser would be dead. As it is, it's probably going to get away and repair. There's not enough vision here for those railguns from Last Rights to do anything, and now it's behind the shelter of this big rock and this big dome radar structure. So, Mark Target, really useful. This should be dead. Tren should have, well, 1 siege cruiser, not 2. He'll have a 3rd soon.
Roger. Displacing now. Moving.
6 fighters in the queue for Last Rights, 4 of them already built. That could also be very effective against the siege cruiser. Siege cruisers have a little bit of anti-air, but it's really weak. Production cruisers have slightly better anti-air, but again, kind of weak. And against 6 fighters, it may not be enough. So it'll be very interesting to see. There are some shots being fired by these siege cruisers, but that's enough railguns. They all have high ground advantage. They switched targets, which is unfortunate. They didn't have the vision, and now there's smoke deployed here by Last Rights own AAVs. So the railguns being misapplied, I think. There's been enough damage by now to kill, I think, both of these siege cruisers if Mark Target were in play, but without using Mark Target and without maintaining vision, it's really hard to do that. These fighters will help. If these fighters stay overhead, not only are they going to do damage to the siege cruisers, they're also going to scout for these railguns if they can get in close enough soon enough. That said, the fighters of Last Rights are going to have a tough time against the interceptors of Tren. Now, one siege cruiser did go down, I believe. Yes, because another one was produced.
Green line confirmed.
And there is skirmishing between sand skimmers and LAVs over here. Last Right's building a significant force of LAVs. He must have had at least 12 before. Some damage being applied to the carrier, which is a little premature, and a lot of damage being taken by these siege cruisers. These siege cruisers now are hiding behind this dune. It's a little tough to see, but there is a dune there, and so they're pretty safe and protected from railguns and can project out missiles at the same time. I don't think that there was a base runner here, but there's definitely some skirmishing between the LAVs and sand skimmers, so this is something to watch, because this is another form of map control, and the LAVs can provide scouting.
Eyes open out there. Railgun assembly complete.
For now, Last Rights is just building more railguns, and they've been working relatively well if you can get the scouting information in. Also worth noting, Tren has not built missile ships. As I say that, he pops out 2 of them. But he hadn't built missile ships before, and so UAVs were still a viable option because Tren had to use his interceptors in order to take them out. It looks like he might be trying to scout with his AAVs while harassing the resource line here of Tren.
Go ahead.
Tracking enemy target.
Not bringing his railguns in very close, though.
Set new heading.
Connect siege cruiser spotted.
Artifact
And that's pretty bad. Being clustered together there's a lot of AoE damage. Pretty much everything Tren does now.
Armored unit
In fact,
lost.
yes, every single unit except for these sand skimmers that Tren has does AoE damage. So Tren needs to keep his units scattered.
Artifact extraction in progress. We're moving up.
Last Rights is now going to be going for an artifact here, and with the units of Tren being relatively immobile and he only has 1 interceptor out, this is probably going to get in as long as no grave sins are committed here by Last Rights Strikecraft. Tren is wisely holding the high ground here so that he can more effectively dispatch these LAVs.
Contact marked.
On our way.
But I think it might be a mistake for Last Rights to be so cautious here. He's giving Tren time to build more of the interceptors, and he's also giving time for this big assault force to move forward. So there's going to be a challenge over here. Now Tren no longer has the high ground advantage against these sand skimmers. And there is going to be an artillery barrage in the background here, not hitting any units. Tren may not know that these railguns are all behind there. A lot of LAVs coming out for Last Rights. Just a ton.
Hostile strike craft eliminated.
17 LAVs. And these railguns, I think, I don't think Tren knew where they were. So now these are in a good position. They all have a high ground advantage. They are pretty vulnerable to these siege cruisers. But they're taking out the assault ships. And if they can avoid these missile barrages, a few of them are going to go down. They can do pretty good damage. 1 siege cruiser down. Mark Target would help a ton here. Another siege cruiser should go down here. I want to see that happen. There are AAVs up here again, which are going to provide some scouting information, especially while these siege cruisers are firing.
Enemy contact on sensor.
Target's on site.
And there is another artifact being picked up here. This was the same artifact that was picked up originally, I believe. These units really clustered together. The AoE from those interceptors is just really doing a number, even with the missile battery here. So while Tren's aircraft are going to take some losses, Last Rights has lost a huge number of railguns here in those last 2 fights. So the thing is, while that's nominally a fight that Last Rights has lost, we need to keep track of 2 things. One, he does have this LEV force here, which is largely intact and has forced Tren to invest in a high number of sand skimmers. And well, I'll get to this in a minute, because that's very interesting, but it just interrupted my train of thought. And I was going to say, Last Rights has 4 out of 5 artifacts, and a base runner still alive approaching the artifact zone. So controlling this now, you know, this part of the map doesn't matter, this part of the map doesn't matter now. It's really everything between this artifact and this extraction zone is what matters. But I was going to say, what's really interesting here as well is there are 2 battlecruisers in the field. And these are Soban battlecruisers, so these have pretty good range because they have railguns. And
On our way.
so
Cruiser detected. Sensor
normally I would
taking
say battle
hostile
cruisers coming out in the field, if it were a coalition battle cruiser, you really want this to come out right next to an enemy carrier, because otherwise they're too short range, too slow to do anything effective. But Soban battle cruisers might be able to work here. There was an LEV, excuse me, a ALM that came in against these sand skimmers while the LEVs were attacking. It doesn't seem to have them pinned down anymore, but this whole zone is really getting locked down by these ALMs.
LAV construction.
And they are maximum power ALMs. So a little bit more skirmishing over here, more railguns going down, pretty much all of the railguns from Last Rights being destroyed by the artillery. It remains to be seen whether these battle cruisers can get a lot of hits in on these siege cruisers, or at least occupy them for a while. The artifact has been picked up here. This is the game-winning artifact. If this goes down, well, Last Rights can try again. But note, Tren has no aircraft. They all died before. And there are a huge number of LEVs here. This is enough LEVs to do significant AA. Tren is pulling them back and has the high ground advantage and is taking a number of them out, but I think that the LAVs are going to win this fight.
Hostile strike craft destroyed.
And especially with the ALMs now to support, there's just not much that Tren can do. He could barrage this area, but I don't think it's going to be enough. And he doesn't have any railguns, so I think this artifact will go in. The ALMs are going to... Here comes the missile barrage.
Enemy on sensors.
It's pretty much going to miss. And here are the battle cruisers ready to mop up this fight in case it goes sour for this base runner, but the base runner will go in. So I just want to take a look real quick at where Last Rights was positioned here. This battle cruiser actually is a new one that was produced. So 3 battle cruisers on the field, a couple here in range of Tren's carrier and his resourcing zone, a couple missile batteries here, so any kind of aircraft that come out of this carrier were going to be destroyed as they took off. This railgun, whatever, it's a scout. Here are 2 battle cruisers. This is a huge amount of damage that is in play, even though these are Soban battle cruisers and not the coalition ones, which I believe pack an even greater punch, but these are at range. And so let's suppose that the artillery here had worked, that all these hits had hit this base runner, the artifact did not go in, right? There are no other base runners on the field. And so this leaves Last Rights in kind of an awkward position where he has to kind of retry and rebuild for that attack. But there's 2 production cruisers here, excuse me, and 2 siege cruisers, and there's a battle cruiser in play. There are a lot of ALMs in play. There are more ALMs coming in. I think this is an ALM. That's just, I don't know if I can see it. It looks like a missile, but I think that's what the ALMs are when they're being dropped. So these would be stunned. The LAV force pretty much destroyed here. You know, whatever. Gonna get some scouting information here. Probably gonna be cleaned up by those siege cruisers. But Last Rights here, by forcing Tren to come out several times, sometimes for the aircraft and sometimes with these siege cruisers, has forced Tren into a fight that he cannot afford to lose because of the Space Runner, and he also cannot win if the fight continues beyond the game ending. Yeah, sure, these siege cruisers might be able to close with this battle cruiser. Great, whatever. Your carrier goes down. Another battle cruiser is probably going to pop out of here pretty soon. ALMs in this whole field could be easy for the siege cruisers to clean up, but more of them being dropped. I mean, they're max level ALMs. Last Rights did a very good job here, so I'm impressed. Pretty exciting game as last one, and that means that we get a game 3. So game 3. Oh, well, I did this backwards. I apparently cast game 3 first, and then cast game 2, and we haven't seen game 1 yet. Whatever, it's fine. To us, it's kind of the same surprise. We still get to see one player win and then the other, and we still don't know who's going to win the last one. So here is game 1, but really it's the 3rd game that we're watching in this set. My mistake. This is Canyon Outpost, and I did not know that Artifact Cup 13 had Canyon Outpost in it, but I think it's the 2nd AC 13 game that I've cast out of just 6 casted so far. where this map has been in rotation. So apparently it was. This is a 2v2 map. Each player gets 2 resource zones, because normally in a 2v2, one carrier spawns here and one carrier spawns right here, and you just kind of start back to back. So
Ready orders.
you can get a lot of resources in play real early on this map, and you don't need to build support cruises or production cruises in order to take advantage of that. So Tren has mostly relocated his carrier here to sort of straddle the 2 zones. These salvagers will remote mine, but will sort of remote mine and drop back off at the nose of the carrier, as we can see here. And so he's going to be able to get a lot of resources just by holding his carrier here. He's building salvagers with the production cruiser as well as the carrier so that he can bootstrap his economy very fast. Last Rights, meanwhile, not doing that. He built a couple salvagers here, but he's building LAVs. And he researched LAVs pretty early. And that's just an unusual move for a map like Canyon Outpost or Dune Sea, which is another 2v2 map that we often see in rotation with 1v1s. Especially because it was also in the 1v1 rotation for the ladder that was built into the game. Still is, but nobody plays it. The auto match games. I don't remember if Canyon Outpost was. I want to say it was, because it was one of the original maps.
Destination set.
This
Salvager online.
Last Rights will continue building salvagers. It's just interesting that he wanted to get these scouts out pretty early. This will serve him well, I think. He might spot this base runner here. Last Rights also did retire his base runner, while Tren did not. And Tren's going for refinery mode. This is super weird. He's going for refinery mode and assault ship fabrication, which is even more weird in combination. While Last Rights has already gone AAV fab and is going to be pumping those out and is going for railgun fab. So the reason I say it's weird to go for assault ship fab and for refinery mode is, first off, refinery mode's only useful if you're going to go to a 3rd resource point. Because let's be real, this remote mine here, not that big a deal. Not worth the 700 CUs this early in the game. I don't know that this is very useful scouting information. Yeah, he's got a carrier anti-salvaging. But this is useful. It's not going to destroy the base runner, but it's useful scouting information. I guess he would have seen it anyway, but whatever. What's weird about this, though, is if you're going to use refinery mode, which Tren now has, why not move the production cruiser out here and continue to remote mine? It just seems silly to invest in that so early. And the reason I say in combination with assault ships it's weird is because assault ships are pretty good if you're going to run into the enemy base with your production cruiser and just plop out assault ships and maintain an assault that way at close range in the enemy base. But this only really makes sense if he's going for interceptors, because I mean, yeah, I guess he's building assault ships back home and he's building another production cruiser, but this just seems like a waste. This isn't that good compared to just remote mining here and having another base, which would be really good.
Hostile contact.
Because it's very tempting on this map to just stick with your 2 home bases. So AAVs here, this is a really big map, so these AAVs took a while to arrive, and an assault ship is going to be able to deal with them, and it is headed right toward them. But the AAVs might still be able to get in and do a ton of damage against the salvaging line if Last Rights manages them carefully. It's a little unfortunate that this 3rd AAV isn't in there to support, because 3 would have made this much more of a sure thing. But that's okay. Oh gosh, keep moving, dude. Keep moving these into there. You do not want to stick around and fight this. Your AAVs do not do any damage to armored targets, and this is an armored target.
Enemy contact on the board.
Yeah, so this kind of fight is going to last a long time because this doesn't take much damage and these don't take much damage. And you want to get in and just trash the salvagers. The salvagers would already be dead by now if these things were in there. I mean, just kill all the salvagers. Tren's only going to get more military units. There's no point hitting that. There we go. Kill the salvagers. Nice smoke there, making these assault ships just useless. You should keep hitting... You should keep hitting that salvager. At least kill one. There we go. Okay. Not a very financially advantageous attack for Last Rights. 2 AAVs for 1 salvager. Next time, I think you just run straight in.
Strike fighter, ready for deployment.
This AAV, sure, you're going to stop a couple scouts.
Enemy sand skimmer on approach.
I don't think it's that valuable. I think it would be much more valuable reinforcing this attack over here. But maybe he was afraid of a sand skimmer flank. So, this is cool. Last Rights, up with 6 fighters. And Tren does have the fighter tech, but he doesn't have any built yet. And the Coalition carrier can just produce so fast. He's a Soban carrier, but still, same thing. And so now there are enough strike fighters here. He might be able to take out a production cruiser, which, sure, useful. I still would go for the salvagers. These are clustered up. These are clustered up. These are really clustered up. Oh my gosh. Those would so go down. This only might go down. Probably not because there's 2 production cruisers here with the AA. More fighters being built, but I bet this survives and regenerates. Okay. I'm wrong. Production cruiser down. But production cruiser down at the cost of 4 or 5 fighters because there were 2 in queue here. 5 fighters for 1 production cruiser, in my opinion, is not worth it. On the other hand, if you bring the fighters in here and you manually kind of tell them to move here out of the range of any production cruisers, and you just hit these, a few hits and these are all dead. That's huge. Then you would just move them away again, bring them back home, and then bring them here. Take these out. These have no AA.
Move order confirmed.
Hostile unit marked.
I think a lot of Coalition and Soban players get in their head that destroying production cruisers is just the automatic win button against Galaxian and Knaft players, and it is if you can very early kill their only production cruiser and then pressure them further. But it's not that big a win button if they already have, what, 2-3 production cruisers? I mean, there's another one there. And also, this is a map where you only need production cruisers for manufacturing. You don't really need it for resourcing.
Sensor post under fire.
So these fighters are going to work well defensively, but imagine if you had like 6 of them here. These salvagers and these ALMs would not be in any danger at all. And now there are interceptors in play from Tren, which are going to pose a very serious threat to the strike fighters because interceptors aren't really good at air-to-air combat. You can see that fighter going down. So this has gone from a worthless attack that would have just been chewed apart by the fighters to a pretty substantial threat with interceptors in play now. And I think it all comes down to the targeting choice.
Salvager destroyed.
There's a production cruiser here again, and these things are mining just fine. Tren finally has the right idea, you know, move this over here. He's still got one over here, which is weird. But anyway, enough of that. Enough of what if. This is the game we're watching, and this is from AC-13 again. So
alert. Hostile strike fighter overhead.
maybe we'll see a salvager go down here, but probably not because this is probably going to die to the interceptor unless it really... Okay. These should just move in
Armored vehicle destroyed.
fast.
Armor moving out.
A salvager has been
Quickly.
lost.
Carrier power reserves
I
expired.
got a retreat. Oh, goodness.
Contact. Enemy strike fighter airborne.
That's unnecessary.
Enemy engaging armored unit. Enemy contact on the board.
It's really interesting because Last Rights has a combination of playing too safe and playing too aggressively. I think he was way too aggressive going for the production cruiser and losing all those fighters wasn't worth it. And now he's playing way too safe. You had 2 AAVs right next to just some juicy, soft salvagers.
Let's roll.
Hostile contact on
Artifacts.
the board.
Last Rights is going to get this one.
Hostile armor on approach.
Tren has bomber tech, by the way. That's just an interesting fact. Tren already has 2 artifacts. There was one that we sort of watched and I didn't comment on. It was almost dead when it got into the extraction zone, but it's not dead. Missile batteries for Last Rights. Now, this is a huge map, so your missile batteries, you've got to be really careful where you position them. You've got to kind of position them on the approaches that the fighter's going to take, because if you just keep them somewhere and then you have mobile units moving around, I mean, you're going to just lose track of your missile ships, and then the fighters are still going to have an angle.
Enemy contact on sensor.
This is also just not a fight you want to take. Move, spread these apart. Don't engage with the assault ships. I mean,
Recovery. Authentication confirmed.
Armored vehicle taking effective fire.
Reposition.
you do want to fight these once your railguns are in play.
Enemy sighted.
Order confirmed.
So,
Reading.
Last Rights is
Enemy
wisely
signature
retreating.
identified.
and bringing in his own strike fighters. So bringing in strike fighters is dangerous here because Tren can always launch his own interceptors as anti-air, which he's going to do.
Move and engage on site.
And so I'd almost just retreat the fighters right away, which he is doing, kind of, but he's gonna lose this one, right? He's gotta lose one of these fighters. I didn't actually see if the fighter went down there, but there's missile batteries taking down a interceptor of Tren. So,
Proceed to rally point. Let's clear out.
a few fighters going down. I don't know how many died, but let's just look at the final counts here. Last Rights has 1, which is getting dangerously close to Tren's home.
Enemy armor inbound.
I expect will be shot down in an attempt to take down that fighter, and Tren has 2 surviving fighters.
Kenneth carrier inbound.
Coordinates confirmed.
Meanwhile, these units are kind of in peril. They're hiding behind the dune, which is really good positioning by Tren, and they do have the high ground bonus. But those railguns, they can't really do anything. I mean, yeah, okay, that's pretty... okay. You know what?
Railgun destroyed.
Underway.
Nice job, missile ship. You did the thing. The railgun died. But these units are doomed. I mean, they can jump out and do some damage here, but... man, that's 2 railguns down. Feels unnecessary, but... I think overall Last Rights will come out ahead if he keeps his railguns back. 3 railguns now. My goodness. 3 railguns and an AAV so far down. To 1 assault ship down. Another AAV going down. These railguns closing the gap, which is so perilous. That's not going to do a whole lot. It does some damage, which is true, but it's just not... Okay, you know what? I lied twice. These missile batteries are just really good at killing things.
Artifact coordinates locked.
There is an AAV attack over here, and this needs to just run in, do a ton of damage really fast, maybe take out that production cruiser. That'd be cool.
Hostile sand skimmer on sensors.
Green line confirmed.
Hostile contact.
This fight has lasted for way too long. I think Last Right should have either just said, you know what, those are behind the dune, I'm running away, I don't care, or swung around the long way. You can still shoot over this little hole here because it's not an obstruction
Enemy
to
sand skimmer on
line of
approach.
sight. And now this railgun's totally going to go down to the sand skimmers. These missile batteries are going to be pretty much unprotected. They could do a lot against the sand skimmers if he shot his own unit there. That'd be cool.
Proceed to rally point. New heading set. Op ready. Green line confirmed.
If he got a really good missile barrage hit, he could do it.
Go for armor.
So, production cruiser, I didn't see if it got destroyed. I want to say yes.
Armored vehicle taking effective fire.
I want to say that's what this is all about, is a destroyed production cruiser. But, don't know. I really want to see a missile barrage here. Not a missile barrage, what is this called again? A
Move and
mortar.
engage on site. Target set. Load and fire.
There we go! You can see them just kind of recoil away. This one needs to go too. I would have kept it, I think, for a better shot, because now he knows that he can just approach. Tren knows that. So LEV's coming out. This will help Last Rights, I think.
Enemy signature
They can be used against air. They can be used against these railguns. I don't know if
Light attack vehicle.
Last Rights had scouted those. These railguns are going to be a real pain in the ass for...
LAV construction.
Excuse me, real pain in the butt. I don't know if this is a PG-13 channel or what, but...
Enemy contact on the board.
Displacing now.
Enemy contact on sensors.
Yeah, so these AVs are going to run away. That makes sense.
Light
These are
attack
all
vehicle engine upgrade complete.
assault ships. Assault railguns, I should say, sorry.
Eyes open up there. Light attack vehicle online.
And so the LEVs should be careful of the assault railguns,
Confirmed. Divert power.
especially because they are armored. But if you get enough of these, I mean, like 20 LEVs right now is... Oh, gosh.
Hostile bomber in the air. LAV taking
So-
effective fire.
That was really close, because
Hostile contact marked.
LEVs can do anti-air,
Enemy
but
unit
LEVs were also
detected.
clustered up. And so, here, you can see good damage being done, but I think he should have waited for the whole... Like, he's only got half of his LEVs here. I wouldn't engage with just half. You're going to just get chewed apart by the assault railguns. You need to mass LEVs in huge numbers in order to really approach assault railguns.
Moving out.
And that one's not even going to go down, so that was kind of... I think Last Rights got too eager there. He figured, oh, I've got so many LEVs. But really, you only had a few up front.
Enemy contact on sensors.
And so just taking the time to say, you know what, I'm going to select all these, right-click in the middle of them, and wait for them to become one single fighting unit. That's a really good thing to do. Oops, my tech feed is all messed up. No upgrades really for the LAVs here. It looks like the LAV boost ability is in. So, I mean, boosting into the very center of an assault railgun group with 20 LAVs would have won that fight. And I think they would have...
Tracking enemy target.
The assault railguns, I think, and the heavy rails could have all gone down. These units could have moved in. That would have been a game-changing fight, I believe. As is, these sand skimmers are probably doomed, so that's nice.
Enemy contact on the board.
Time to clear out.
An LAV has been
But it's
lost.
not the kind of hit that I think Last Rights was going for. So we have some maneuvering here,
Contact marked.
scouting here, in place for Last Rights. But Tren is kind of up on this hill, behind this hill, with the railguns.
Charge weapons, let's move.
Enemy
So yeah,
signature
these are going to go
identified.
down. Check out that AA, though. That fighter just got taken out by the LAVs. Maybe there was the missile ships helping
LAV
too.
destroyed.
Bomber here coming in,
CU's
doing pretty good
exhausted.
damage against
Salvage are
LAVs.
awaiting orders. Location marked.
Enemy sighted.
It's kind of an unconventional use of a bomber.
Cruiser ready.
Support cruisers. So, support cruisers
CU
to
site
help
has been
reinforce this
exhausted.
blob. That's pretty cool. I'm still worried a lot about the sheer number of railguns here
Roger, awaiting
that Tren is
orders.
building. There are strike fighters here in play for Last Rights, so if he can get Tren's railguns away from the missile ships, draw out these assault railguns, he can use fighters against them, and then go toe-to-toe with the heavy railguns, which Tren doesn't have that many of compared to the railguns of Last Rights.
Green light to proceed. Move.
And there's a support cruiser here to give regeneration capabilities
Fighter ready
to
launch.
the
Enemy
railguns.
sand skimmer on approach.
Destination
And
set.
even AAVs to help against sand skimmers. But on the other hand, if these assault railguns get right on top of these railguns, then the railguns are
New bearing
doomed.
on hostile target.
So here come the strike fighters. These are gonna, these are gonna pull back,
Green line
which is
confirmed.
going to bring the strike fighters right in range of these missile
Sand skimmer
batteries.
on sensors.
Maybe. Oh, they're gonna switch targets. Yeah, that AOE hits on the fighters there. That's pretty bad. That's never going down. That's just gonna
Strike fighter
regen.
has been lost.
So those strike fighters were just forfeit. Some nice LAV work coming in here. Again, not waiting for all of the LAVs, and so now this sand skimmer blob is going to be able to overwhelm them.
Reposition.
Last Rights has had so many LAVs, but just never had them in one place for long enough to do any real meaningful damage.
Rally point designated.
Quick look at the economy. Last Rights has one exhausted resource point, one full one-on-one expansion.
Base runner taking enemy fire.
Tren, meanwhile, 2 expansions, 2 resource points back home.
Enemy
Not
sighted.
exhausted, so maybe it wasn't mining as much, but
Enemy signature identified. Railgun engaging enemy units.
has more resource income coming in, that's for sure.
Hostile sand skimmer on sensors.
Green line confirmed.
And this just looks like a blob that beats Last Rights because the siege cruisers. This is a blob that beats Last Rights because of the sand skimmers that are just in so much higher number because the LAVs are only streaming in. And yeah, you know, Last Rights kind of fended off these sand skimmers with all of the ALMs, but
Enemy contact on
this is where the real fight's going to happen. There's a lot of annoying terrain here that's going to make the assault railguns very effective. There's terrain that's going to allow the siege cruisers to fight. Now, artifacts, I haven't been paying attention to. There is an artifact here, and that would bring it to 4 out of 5. Not a game-winning artifact, but
Tracking
close.
hostile.
And no other base runner.
Enemy unit detected.
Copy. Coordinates set.
New threat identified.
Copy.
Targeting jammer
On
is
our way.
probably premature there.
Enemy sand skimmer on approach.
But 2 assault railguns going right down to these Soban railguns. Soban railguns maybe could have stayed up on the dune there and maintained a high ground advantage,
Enemy
but
contact on the board.
also wise to keep them moving. Now, the support cruisers can repair some of the damage being done here and definitely bring them back up if the railguns survive. These railguns all have a high ground advantage. They're going to do a lot of damage, but most of the artillery hits were prevented, and lots of railguns here going down for Tren as well. Meanwhile,
Target set.
this artifact will go in if it doesn't make any real mistakes here. So, the artifact game is now up at 4 out of 5 to 2. And I think the problem here now is the siege cruisers. These railguns were just not enough to do any lasting damage to this fleet here from Tren. The support cruisers are not enough to repair the railguns quickly enough, and the AVs didn't do anything. The AVs, I think, maybe should have run in and targeted these heavy railguns. So instead, with this force on the run, with Sandscammer's force here that's superior, making an entrance, all we have is these units, which are 2 assault cruisers. I noticed them before and didn't really note them, and that's going to be a big threat to the resourcing here, but it's not where it needs to be. So with Last Rights so close to artifact victory, he's probably going to be very tempted to say, oh, this is interesting.
Moving to guard position.
So microwave emitter here is going to come a bit late. All the units, I think, are going to move out of it before it lands.
Enemy signature identified.
That is too bad for Last Rights. The microwave emitter is not quite as good as a cruise missile.
An LAV has been lost.
Maybe waiting for the group to get into a really tight space here and then microwave emitting there would have been effective. So these assault cruisers, yeah, they're going to take out a production cruiser, maybe. They're definitely going to take out this resourcing point. I just don't think it matters that much unless they can continue to press forward and further threaten the resourcing and production. If they came in the other approach and took out 2 production cruisers, that would have been a real serious threat to Tren, because he wouldn't be able to produce units as quickly. But now,
a sensor post has been lost. Assault cruiser taking enemy fire.
there's just not that much hope for Last Rights. These units are going to go down because railguns are just going to outrange assault cruisers all the time. Assault cruisers have barely any armor.
Green line confirmed.
Assault cruiser destroyed.
Grid updated.
Those are gone. Only the support cruisers really survived from the earlier fight. And unlike previous fights that Last Rights has lost with his railguns or not done as well in, this wasn't one where a marked target would have been particularly effective. This was a case of just having not enough railguns, I think. So bombers coming in, lots of AA, fighters coming in. But this really looks like this is just all forms of attack coming in from Tren to tighten the noose on Last Rights. There's very little Last Rights can do at this point with what little resourcing he has. Neither of the main resource points in use. One of them fully exhausted. And Tren, meanwhile, is on 1, 2, 3, 4, well, 4 really, and then I guess 5 soon, resource points. So, Tren's economic gambit did sort of play off, but only now, only in the late game. For a long time, Last Rights was going toe-to-toe with Tren in terms of military, and certainly was outpacing Tren on artifacts, and as a consequence, really, of map control as well.
Get us moving.
Going mobile.
So now we have a bit of a stalemate, but
Ready.
you know, there is something that Last Rights could try.
Sensor post under
There are
fire.
7 minutes left on the clock, and so if Last Rights can survive for 7 minutes, he wins the game.
Sensor post down.
However, if it got too close to that, Tren has certainly plenty of time to just grab 2 artifacts and tie it. Or perhaps even
Enemy
a third
contact on the
and
board.
win entirely. And I think Tren has enough lethal force at this time in the game
Contact on sensors.
to just destroy Last Rights' carrier.
Displace to that CU field.
Enemy bomber overhead.
Bombing an ALM. That really,
Set new head.
really, Tren?
Hostile contact on the board.
You couldn't find a better target like these railguns or these salvagers.
Tracking enemy
Or, I
targets.
mean,
Read you.
so this is interesting, I
Tracking
guess.
hostile.
But I think all it really does, if Tren is paying attention, is tells him to move forward. But okay, Tren's not really paying attention, loses some units here, but these will regenerate. Nearly dead Gaussian units are not really dead;
Enemy
they're
contact
just
on
fully
sensors.
alive once they regenerate. So a
Hostile
couple
contact
LEVs coming in
marked.
here, yeah, those are dead. But when you're fighting a Gaussian or KNF opponent,
Copy. Coordinates
you
set.
do need to make sure that you get those killing blows, and you have some kind of, even if it's a very small amount of damage, you have some kind of damage always available at your
Vehicle under
disposal
fire.
to take out those units and finalize
LAV
those
has been
kills.
lost. Enemy sighted.
Copy.
If you're fighting a coalition
Time to
opponent,
move.
Hostile
you can
threat
kind of
marked on
choose when you want to
sensors.
do it. You could even damage a bunch of units and then just say, okay, great, you know, either they fight me
Enemy
damaged and I
signature
kill them,
identified.
or they have to go all the way back home
Enemy contact on
and
the
are
board.
no
Proceed
longer
to
on the
rally
field of
point.
battle for some period of time. This just seems like a suicide run.
Hostile unit marked.
against these heavy railguns that somehow have high ground.
Detected. Armored vehicle taking effective fire. Enemy railgun firing on friendlies.
That support cruiser is way too close.
Armored vehicle destroyed.
Had no business being that
Railgun
close.
engaging enemy units.
It's not repairing the railguns,
Sensor
and
box
it's
is
taking
taking
damage
hostile
and
fire.
vulnerable to these railguns.
Going mobile.
Enemy signature identified.
Rally point designated. Move out.
So now we're down to just less than 5
Enemy
minutes.
unit detected.
Ready.
Last Rights still wants an
Tracking enemy
artifact.
target.
And, you know, if
Awaiting
his
orders.
Soban carrier were a little more
have view
powerful,
bearing on
it might
hostile
work.
target.
He might be able to shield things with a Soban carrier, but it's probably
User
wise
identified.
just resourcing with
Ready.
it.
Enemy contact on the board.
With these
Enemy
siege
contact
cruisers
on
back
sensors.
here, I don't think
Proceed to rally point.
that Last Rights really has an escape route. Otherwise, he could maybe
Can have siege
come
cruisers
through
spotted.
here into the extraction zone and just cover long enough with his railguns. But with these sitting here,
Hostile contact marked.
and with all of this air power, that's a lot of bombers that are queued up.
Light attack vehicle online.
Technically,
been lost.
Last Rights has a path to victory. At this point, I think that just surviving for
Ready,
4
update.
minutes is that path. You might be able to run away with a carrier, especially if you go this way. Hey,
Copy.
take the
Order
railguns,
set.
take the carrier,
On our way.
go this way. Then once those railguns come in, run back away. I mean, you know, run around these rocks enough and just take out whatever units are nearby. Maybe you use a microwave emitter and a clutch play and just survive for 3 minutes. Because, well,
Sensor
Tren's
post
moving up
down.
base runners. So Tren's seen that path to victory and is going to
Enemy
do
sighted.
something about it.
Microwave emitter deployed.
There's a microwave emitter that can do... okay, they notice.
Hostile contact
That's
on
the problem. If they notice and they're not forced to be in the area, it's not that useful to deploy a microwave emitter.
Enemy on sensors. LAV taking effective fire.
The best microwave emitters are deployed when
LAV destroyed.
your opponent is left with the choice of stay in the microwave emitter and
Hostile
die,
unit marked.
or leave the microwave emitter and lose some critical objective. You know, like a artifact, you know, denying an artifact, or killing somebody's carrier, or some positioning in some fight, something like that. I don't know if Last Rights accounted for these. A microwave emitter here would have actually been much more beneficial in order to get this base runner across. It's got a targeting jam instead, which isn't
Roger that.
gonna
An
do
LAV
much.
has been lost.
Hostile forces are pursuing an artifact.
But this base runner now, which could have maybe hidden in these hills before if these siege cruisers were dead or just not there, is now going to have to contend with these railguns. So unless he hops this base runner right back over pretty soon, well, no. I mean, at this point, it's over. These two artifacts are going to get in well before this one even could get in if there weren't
Support cruiser destroyed. Base
enemies
runner taking
there.
enemy fire.
And that base runner is going to go down. And there's no way that... Unless these fight... No, I don't think there's any way that Last Rights can keep this from tying up. I mean, he would need to get his strike fighters out, which there is a missile ship here, but he can move the strike fighters around, try and take out one of these base runners, and then he would win the time victory, because he could survive for 2 minutes. I think.
Enemy contact on the board.
But he's not deploying the strike fighters. That's your path to victory.
Hostile unit marked.
On our way.
Oh, goodness. Or a microwave emitter here, if you had it,
Coordinates confirmed.
would have been amazing. As it is, he's using a microwave emitter here as a sort of, you know, denial. So this is really good. You can't go through here now.
Enemy contact on sensors.
That push was denied, but I think with a minute and 30 left, he could have run away with the carrier, and microwaving here would have been much better.
Enemy
Now,
forces have acquired an artifact.
microwaving or using the strike fighters, I think the opportunity is gone,
We must recover another artifact in order to succeed.
because now the artifact score is tied, and when sudden death comes,
Strike fighter taking fire.
neither player will win.
Hostile unit marked.
Returning to carrier. Green line confirmed.
Strike fighter down.
So I've called out a lot of opportunities where Last Rights could just win or could have just done better in a fight, and that's not necessarily fair to Last Rights, because Tren has also
Enemy contact on
committed
the board.
similar mistakes, and I think mostly it's that Tren is just
Enemy bomber
so
inbound.
passive in this game, relatively speaking.
Sensor post down.
He's
Base runner
really
engaging
just
hostile.
consolidating force. 4
Hostile bomber
bombers. How many
engaging
siege
units.
cruisers? 6 siege cruisers.
Combat alert. Base runner destroyed.
That's disgusting.
Command carrier taking damage.
Moving forward with massive carrier power. I mean,
Enemy signature identified.
Tren let this get to a minute and 30.
Extraction.
Well, really, let it get to 30 seconds before Last Rights surrendered here. But there were opportunities there for Last Rights to win that, I think. And while that is a criticism of Last Rights for not taking those opportunities or not executing on them, that's also a criticism of Tren for allowing those opportunities to exist. So letting it go to like 1:30 with a 2 artifact deficit while Last Rights had strike fighters and had a microwave is really dangerous. I think like a microwave just right here as those base runners were coming in, plus strike fighters coming in around here, at least one of those things is going down. I mean, even if Tren notices, one of those is going down. And then it's a matter of run away with that Soban carrier, power up the armor, and just hope that you run out the clock. Now, maybe if these units had gotten in, that it would have been a little harder, but worth a shot, right? As it was, really interesting game. Went to 20 seconds on the clock. Tren now, obviously, with a huge dominating force. Last Rights able to do a whole lot with very little, relatively speaking, on the economy. We'll take a look at those stats. Because Tren was on more bases for most of the game, and you can see the difference in the economy. It's not actually as big as I was expecting. I was expecting Tren to have like double the resources collected. But definitely a huge gap here. 11K. It's really more like 75% is how much Last Rights had compared to Tren. About 11K more CUs, and that's a lot. That's just a huge number of units. So combat-wise, I mean, that's nothing really surprising there. But this is big. This is what allowed Tren to survive into the late game. And you can see why when some of these little fights don't quite go the way that you would want, that can snowball. And so Last Rights early, maybe not necessarily picking off as many salvagers as he would hope with 2 AAVs. He only got 1, and I think maybe he probably could have gotten 4, 5, 6. That snowballs. And so being able to get a little more precision with those early attacks and with those little fights here and there, using mark target where appropriate to take out those critical units before they regen, that can make or break a game. So both players definitely well played, very well played on both players for the entire series. All 3 games, I would say, really gripping. Bear in mind, this was actually game 1. This was not the deciding game of the series per se, because I casted these in the wrong order. This was at the time game 1 on Canyon Outpost. Game 2 was the Shallows, which is the previous game I casted. And that one was a game that Last Rights picked up on an artifact victory and did a really good job corralling Tren's slower units and sort of forcing him into unfavorable fights and a situation where he just didn't really have any path to victory. And game 3 was the first game that I casted, which was on the Boneyard, and that one Tren took, and, well, you just watched, so you know how that game went. But that is just a quick recap. Thank you for watching, and I will be casting more AC-13 soon. I already casted Indigo versus Sparrow, if you haven't seen that one. That was also a good match. And there are 2 more quarterfinals matchups before going into the semis. So Tren will advance at this point. Go watch Indigo versus Sparrow if you haven't found out already who advances there, and stay tuned for more.